In the year 1457 BC, a ruler of Egypt died after 22 years on the throne. That ruler had reigned over one of the most prosperous periods in Egyptian history. That ruler was given a king's funeral, buried in the Valley of the Kings. And 20 years later, someone tried to erase every trace that they had ever existed. Because that ruler was not a king. She was a queen who had chosen to call herself Pharaoh, and her name was Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was born around 1507 BC. Her father was the Pharaoh Thutmose I, one of the greatest military kings in Egyptian history. Her mother, Queen Ahmose, was the royal daughter of the previous ruling dynasty. So in her veins ran the bloodlines of two royal houses. In ancient Egypt, royal blood was measured through the female line. A king became a king by marrying a king's daughter, and Hatshepsut was the eldest king's daughter of her generation. When her father died, the throne passed to her half-brother, Thutmose II. He was a sickly, unremarkable young man, and Hatshepsut was married to him by custom. Thutmose II ruled for only 3 or 4 years. He produced no sons with Hatshepsut, only a daughter, Neferure. And then, in about 1479 BC, Thutmose II died young. The throne had to pass to his only son, a child born to a minor wife named Thutmose III. The boy was perhaps 6 years old. He could not rule, so, as was customary, his stepmother, Hatshepsut, became regent. A woman standing behind a boy king, running the kingdom until he was old enough. This was not unusual. Egyptian queens had done it before. What happened next was unusual, because Hatshepsut did not simply rule in the boy's name. Somewhere around the 7th year of the regency, she did something no woman had ever done in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. She had herself crowned Pharaoh, not Queen Regent, not Queen Mother, Pharaoh, the living God-King of Egypt. And immediately, she began a campaign of visual propaganda unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Her official statues began to show her with the attributes of a male pharaoh, the false beard of kingship, the kilt, the crown. This was not a woman trying to pretend to be a man. It was something far stranger. It was a woman deliberately adopting the iconography of kingship, because kingship was male by design. The pharaoh was not just a political leader. The pharaoh was the living embodiment of the god Horus, and Horus was male. So Hatshepsut did what the role required. She took on the visual language of Horus, the dress, the beard, the titles. In inscriptions, she was referred to with masculine pronouns, but she did not hide who she was. Her inscriptions acknowledged her as the daughter of the god Amun, the female pharaoh. This was not a disguise. It was a complete reimagining of what a pharaoh could be. To make this acceptable to her priests and officials, Hatshepsut had her court scribes tell a story about her own birth. The story was carved into the walls of her mortuary temple. It claimed that the god Amun himself had come to her mother, Queen Ahmose, had taken the form of Thutmose I, and had conceived Hatshepsut directly as a divine act. The inscription declared that Amun said to the infant, "You shall be a mighty king over this whole land," divine right of kingship explicitly bestowed. It was brilliant political theology. She was not just claiming to be Pharaoh, she was claiming that the god had always intended her to be Pharaoh. And it worked. Her priests accepted her, her officials served her, her court scribes wrote her into the king lists as the rightful Pharaoh. And crucially, her young stepson, Thutmose III, accepted her. She did not remove him from the royal succession. She kept him beside her, as a co-pharaoh in name, junior co-pharaoh in practice. She educated him. She had him trained as a military commander. She gave him the army to play with, a ceremonial co-ruler, kept useful and kept close. For 22 years, this arrangement held, the older woman ruling, the younger man growing up, the kingdom at peace. Hatshepsut's 22-year reign was extraordinary, not because of conquests. She was not a conqueror. It was extraordinary because of everything else she did. She began the largest building program Egypt had seen in centuries. Her greatest project was her own mortuary temple at a place called el-Bahari. The temple is carved into a cliff face, three-tiered terraces connected by long ramps, colonnades of columns, reliefs on every wall telling the story of her reign. Even today, 3,500 years later, the temple at el-Bahari is considered one of the most beautiful buildings ever constructed. She commissioned 4 obelisks at the Temple of Karnak, gigantic tapering stone needles rising 100 feet, carved from single blocks of pink granite. 2 of those obelisks still stand at Karnak today, the tallest ancient obelisk on its original site anywhere in the world. And then, in about the 9th year of Hatshepsut's reign, Hatshepsut launched one of the most famous trading expeditions of the ancient world, an expedition to the land of Punt. Punt was somewhere on the East African coast, probably present-day Eritrea or Somalia. It produced things that Egypt desperately wanted: myrrh trees, gold, incense, exotic animals. Hatshepsut commissioned 5 ships. She personally chose the commander, a trusted noble named Nehesi. The expedition sailed down the Red Sea and into legend. When the ships returned to Egypt, they brought back 31 living myrrh trees, their roots packed in earth, live baboons, ebony wood, gold, and the chief of Punt himself coming to negotiate trade. The entire expedition was recorded in astonishing detail on the walls of Hatshepsut's temple. Every animal, every tree, every gift, every trade. It remains one of the most detailed records of any ancient trade mission. For 22 years, Hatshepsut ran Egypt. She raised her stepson. She educated her daughter, Neferure. She kept peace with foreign powers. And then sometime around 1458 BC, when she was about 50 years old, Hatshepsut died, probably from bone cancer, possibly aggravated by a skin ointment that contained carcinogenic compounds. She was given a king's burial in the Valley of the Kings. Her sarcophagus was placed in a tomb she had prepared for herself. Thutmose III, her stepson, was now sole pharaoh. He was in his early 30s. He had spent 22 years as co-ruler under Hatshepsut, and he proved himself to be one of the greatest military pharaohs Egypt ever produced. He led 17 military campaigns into the Levant. He conquered Syria. He extended Egyptian power further than any pharaoh before him. For 20 years after Hatshepsut's death, he ruled as a conquering king, and for 20 years he seemed to have accepted her legacy. Her monuments stood, her name appeared in the king lists, her temple stood intact. And then, in about 1438 BC, 20 years after Hatshepsut had died, something changed. Thutmose III, now in his 50s, gave an order that would haunt Egypt for 3,000 years. He ordered the systematic erasure of Hatshepsut from history. Teams of stonecutters were sent to every temple she had built, every statue that bore her face, every inscription that bore her name. They chiseled her image out of the walls, they smashed her statues, they plastered over her paintings, they chiseled her name out of inscriptions and replaced it with the names of earlier male pharaohs. The scale of the erasure was staggering. Every obelisk she had raised, every temple she had built, every statue she had commissioned, attacked, defaced, or buried.